Namo Amida. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whenever you are, in whichever realms of existence you are, whatever condition you're in, whatever mind states you're in. Welcome to my channel. Wanted to talk about today was seeing through the bullshit, basically. And that sort of started for me, I would say, really in high school. I began more to see the truth about myself, I think, sort of compared to the world. What the world said about how, the efficacy that people have in the world, the ability that people have in the world to do things and change things and be a part of things or change themselves. I started to see through that, and just in terms of myself in high school, probably my junior year, and then heavily in the 90s. I really began to see it. So that was about 5 years, it's actually several years after that point where I started seeing it about myself, that actually what the world says about what the individual can do in life is bullshit. I started to see it. I didn't completely see it. I started to see it. And then in the 90s with, learning about Buddhism and Taoism and different things, and much more awareness of things, I began to see the bullshit in a lot of things. And the reason I set out sort of to do that, or the reason I wound up seeing through all those things, was of events that occurred in my life and the way my family was. And things that happened to me, and I was just trying to work it all out and understand it all. And in the process of doing that, through various means, I saw not only through the bullshit and hypocrisy and veneer of my family, or I began to see it, began seeing it. I started to begin to see the same thing in my local community, the bullshit, the total bullshit, the total hypocrisy, the total self-centeredness. Same thing with my family. So the selfishness, the self-centeredness of that was really behind moving and motivating everything. So I saw that in the local community. I also saw it, the same thing in culture. I saw through the bullshit of society and culture and all that propaganda, the socialization bullshit that you're raised with. And when I say bullshit, I don't mean like, I include in that the dysfunction of it, just the haphazard ignorance of it, as well as the totally, as well as all the other stuff. So I started to, and I saw that in with politics as well, the utter total bullshit of politics. I started to see as well. I don't care what party it is, just the utter total bullshit behind the vast majority of any political party, especially the mainstream ones. The mainstream ones are the worst, but also the third parties and the lesser parties as well. Just there's some of them are even worse, like just total bullshit. So I started seeing through all that, and that kind of, you know, was increased for about 10 years until the early noughties, and then some certain events happened that just brought all that to a head. And I just realized how completely untrustworthy human beings were, both in my family, in the broader society, in whatever aspect of life, fellow employees, whatever, whoever it was, how untrustworthy they were. Like, I had already started to see that. I just didn't trust people. I just less and less, sort of through the 90s, less and less trust, you know, my trust in people just dropped, you know, throughout the 90s. But when this kind of realization came in the early noughties of just how bad it was. So just seeing all the bullshit in the world, like just all the complete disconnect with reality of human beings going about doing anything. And then just certain events happened in my own personal life. My fiance at the time and I were being stalked by this her former boyfriend and former fiance, who ironically wound up being like a freaking the director of this like psychotherapy counseling center. like that's what I'm talking about. Like, the world is such utter bullshit. And so I started to see that, and that's partly the reason I say all this. Just, you know, that's just one example. A complete and utter psychopath is the director, wound up being the director of like a counseling and psychotherapy agency organization. I think it was a private one. But, you know, it's just like, are you fucking kidding me? So, anyway, so it was that, and then some other things happening with my family, and I just realized, like, what? I just realized the total untrustworthiness, not only of human beings in general, but my own family, anyone around me, pretty much, more or less, to some degree or another. I mean, I trust people by degrees, really, now. Sorry, just greeting someone on the path here. Anyway, so, you know, I do to this day, I trust people by degrees, but only by degrees and only very little, unless I'm very close to them. And even in those cases where I'm really close to them, I don't really trust them fully. So anyway, so I just saw, it just suddenly hit me. Like, I remember the moment I was in my apartment, and I remember I was standing in the kitchen, and I remember it as vivid as day when the whole reality of it kind of, as best could strike me, you know, within my perceptions and, you know, and limited understanding as a bamboo, as a being. I didn't know I was a bamboo at that point, but I knew I was in a pretty pathetic state. I knew I was in a pretty, not a pathetic state, but you know, pretty precarious kind of a situation in life, knowing what I knew, you know, and knowing about how life actually works, and my inability to really do anything but survive in it. So anyway, the whole reason I'm saying all this is that I'm grateful that it came to that point, that happened, because it was shortly thereafter that, within a few years of that incident happening, I think it was, so probably about 4 years later, 4 to 6 years later, because I'm not sure when the other event happened, where I called out to Amida, Buddha, for the first time, literally falling to my knees and doing it because I was crushed by the weight of things. But it was that this is what this moment, that moment, sort of set the groundwork for that. This moment that I'm talking about set this stage for all that to happen. And you know, and that was the way it was. I'm not saying that has to be that way for everyone, but that was the way it was for me. You know, I don't think, you know, everyone, you know, comes to that point where they see that aspect of the world necessarily, and it's, you know, it depends on our own karmic causes and conditions, what we can sort of see and understand and perceive about the world and its workings, or dysfunction, or hypocrisy, or total bullshit of samsaric circus show bullshit. So, you know, I'm just saying, for whatever reason, I had the karmic causes. Well, the reason is because I had the karmic causes to be able to see that at that stage in my life. And it was important to get to that point. It was really important to get to that point where I pretty much lost hope in this life. I lost hope in this reality. I lost any hope, not only hope, but any respect or any trust for it, this reality, in any way, pretty much. And so, which was good. And I'd say that was at a time in my life too, where I wasn't necessarily directly focused on Buddhism or reading about Buddhism. It was more, this happened when I was just approaching life in a secular survivalist kind of way, trying to do my best. Up to that point, I was still, you know, up till that point where I had that realization of just the utter total bullshit of it all, that, you know, I was still trying to do certain things to try to improve my life in, you know, according to the narrative of family, society, and, you know, all that utter bullshit. But after that, I kind of that weakened that greatly. I'm not going to say I tried to stop doing that, but anyway, I was trying to do that in a secular way. I wasn't trying to do it necessarily through Buddhism or anything else. I was just trying to I was living and approaching life in a secular way, pretty much in every way at that point, and came to that conclusion, and then realized shortly thereafter that like, well, yeah, that's like very shortly thereafter, yeah, that's pretty much what Buddhism, you know, teaches. So about reality, the unsatisfactory, impermanent nature of a world completely built on ignorance and lies, this total, our own lies, you know, and based on past karmic garbage, you know, that we've accumulated. It's just it's like what's a good analogy for that? You know, it's like the waste product of our karma. You know, it's like anyway, that's probably not a good example, but you know, this, I realized that moment, that's what Buddhism teaches. So when I came to that, it's another occasion. There are lots of these where I came through secular or even scientific means. I came to the conclusion that Buddhism is correct. That Buddhism, I saw the Buddhist teachings even without looking through a Buddhist lens. I came to them, through secular means. So anyway, it was a key moment. It was just a very key moment in just realizing. So not only did I lose hope and I lost respect for this reality, I lost hope in it, in achieving anything in it. I lost respect for it. I lost trust in it, trust in any aspect of it, or at least I didn't completely lose it, but that started to loosen up my trust and anything that I any stake I had in samsaric bullshit began to really drastically loosen at that point. Just when I just came to that realization, it wasn't anything I was trying to necessarily do. It's just something that hit me through, my experience and things I was trying to do and things that, had happened. And like I said, within 4 to 6 years afterward is when I had that experience where I just realized, okay, my only way out is Amida. My only hope is Amida. But and I remembered, at that moment, I remembered that Tricycle magazine article that I'd read in the sort of early to mid 90s, and it all came back to me. I was like, oh, yeah, that's, it was always in the back of my mind, in a file somewhere. And finally, came, and that moment that I just talked about, in that process of realizing the utter samsaric shit show that we live in, was a big part of coming to that point where, I just, that first time I went down, I literally got, dropped to my knees and, into Gasho, and cried out to Amida Buddha to help me, save me, show me his teachings. And then went from there, off and on my path, long and winding path, as I've referred to it before, with the song reference. And I never once, is one of those moments where there's, before this moment and after this moment. There's that Denzel Washington movie, where he says that he's a detective and there's these things happening, and and there's this, he's given this monologue, kind of detective, hard-boiled detective kind of monologue for this movie, voiceover, I should say, not monologue, voiceover. And one of the things he says is something along the lines of, there's those moments in life where there's before this moment and after this moment. And this was one of those for me. My life was never the same after that first, that moment in the early noughties where I just realized the utter nonsense, like an utter evil, an utter precariousness, an utter danger I was in of being in samsara. And my life has never been the same since then. There's a kind of handful of other moments like that in my life, which I may or may not get to in other videos, to relate to my path to Jodo, to and through Jodo Shinshu Buddhism. But that was a key one. I suppose the one before that too, where I started to realize that, the things I was realizing about myself from pretty early on in like high school, just how, and how I started to realize then, like, all I can do is just what I can do. I'm not going to achieve all these things that I just don't believe anymore that I can achieve all these things that my family claims I can achieve, and that society claims I can achieve and be and do. That's when I started realizing that. And that was, and I think, probably, that's when that started. And then probably after, I think sometime in the last 10 years is when I think I fully realized all I can do is be a survivor. And if you looked at my life, people would be like, how can you say that? You've done so much. You've done all these things. You've overcome this and that. You've look at what you've achieved, personally, and et cetera, et cetera. And they just have no clue. They just can't see what I'm saying. That was, yeah, I did that, but I was being a survivor. I was I was surviving. I was doing, you know, I wasn't doing anything, like I wasn't trying to achieve goals like most people have. I wasn't trying to do that. It was just survival. Even when I thought I was trying to, you know, operate in that way that you know, society and family and the political arena and everything else tries to get you, the narrative that they, even when I was believing that narrative and thinking, oh yeah, I'm you know, I'm trying to achieve, I'm doing something, I was still just surviving. I was still just being a survivor, you know, and eventually I became conscious of that. And pretty much I really became conscious of it in the 90s, and it just grew from there. So that's a key part too, is like not only realizing the bullshit about the world, but the bullshit about myself, and my own limited capacities, and my own, you know, the limitations of my mind and my abilities for doing anything in life. And becoming more and more realistic about that. That was an important aspect, again, coming to that moment where I first reached out to Amida. And then that grew. I, you know, got ahead of myself when I said in the last 10 years that came about. It came out really before then that I realized that about myself as well as Samsara. So anyway, just very important aspects of the you know, my path to Jodo Shinshu, and realizing the need for Amida Buddha and Amida Buddha's Dharma Gate, Amida Buddha's primal vow, and Amida Buddha's other power, all pretty much one and the same. But I just didn't, you know, I should say that's all a key part of that. A key part of that. So, you know, for me anyway, that was a key aspect of how that all came down. So I think I've said pretty much all I was going to say in this video. There's so much more I could say about the utter ignorance, BS, untrustworthiness, unsatisfactoriness of samsara and all aspects thereof at every level. But I think that's enough for this video. So, Namo Amida Bu.